Special Senses by Megan McMaster. What are special senses? Special senses differ from the general senses, those that detect temperature, pain, and touch. Special senses rely on receptors that are specialized cells that will detect a specific stimuli, instead of having receptors that are neurons like general senses, excluding olfaction. Only special sense that has receptors that are neurons. The special sense organs are housed in the head, which means that the axons of cranial nerves deliver the information. The preface is riding on a bike on a foggy day, approaching a four-way stop and a railroad track with 3 other vehicles at the stop. What special senses will help me determine how to cross the intersection? And what special senses will I not use? What special senses will be used? Vision, hearing, and balance. For vision, this special sense will help me see all of the factors while I approach the intersection. Trying to see through the foggy weather, each of the cars at the intersection, as well as noticing the railroad tracks and making sure the gate isn't down and a train isn't traveling through. Noticing other bicyclists, vehicles, and pedestrians surrounding me. Understand my surroundings is huge, and having peripheral vision is a plus because it can make or break a decision in a split second. Vision pathway. Step 1 of the vision pathway is the retina of each eye will detect visual stimuli from portions of the right and left visual fields. Step 2 is when some visual stimuli crosses at the optic chiasma. This is where stimuli from each half of the visual field are segregated so they can reach the opposing hemisphere of the brain. The final step of the visual pathway is the stimuli traveling from the thalamus to the visual cortex in the medial portion of the occipital lobe. The brain's interpretation. Our sight begins as soon as light hits our retina. It begins by comparing the amount of light striking any small area of the retina with surrounding light. Once information is received by the retina and the electrical signals, the information is sent via the optic nerve to other parts of our brain. Visual information from the retina is relayed through the lateral geniculate nucleus of the thalamus to the primary visual cortex. As soon as the information is received by the brain, it is quickly interpreted. The brain will automatically correct distorted information caused by movement, noses, and eye blood vessels, and instantly gauges distances, interprets objects, and detects motion. Hearing. Helps with balance. Could cause a distraction. This sense could prepare me for a sudden stop. The hearing pathway. Step 1 of the auditory pathway. Signals travel through the axons of the cochlear portion of the vestibular-cochlear nerve to the cochlear nuclei at the medulla pons conjunction. Then the axons from the cochlear nuclei will contact the superior ulvarine nucleus in the pons. The inferior colliculus of our midbrain receives the auditory stimuli next. Then the stimuli is relayed to the medial geniculate nucleus of the thalamus. Lastly, the thalamus will send the signals to the primary auditory cortex in the superior portion of the temporal lobe. The brain's interpretation. Not only does the process of hearing have to travel through the different aspects of our ears, it must reach the brain to then be interpreted. Sound waves will enter our ear canal, then cause the eardrum and bones to vibrate. The tiny hair cells inside of our cochlea will then convert those vibrations into electric signals that get picked up by our auditory nerve. Signals sent to the brain from the auditory nerve are then interpreted as sounds. Balance. Two components important in detecting head tilting and linear acceleration are our utricle and saccule. Semicircular ducts detect the rotational head movements, and vestibular nuclei project the cerebellum and spinal cord, inferior parietal lobe, and the cranial nerve. Balanced vestibular sensation pathway. Our brain must receive and analyze certain stimuli to coordinate a response in order to help maintain equilibrium. For those responses to be produced, vestibular signals are needed to reach a few areas of the central nervous system. First, they travel to the vestibular nuclei located in the medulla pons junction. Next, the vestibular nuclei forwarded to the thalamus and inferior parietal lobe. The cranial nerve nuclei, cerebellum, and spinal cord also receive stimuli. Special senses that will not be used: smell, which is known as olfaction, and taste, which is known as gustation. Smell. Olfaction neurons detect chemical substances we distinguish as odors, and they are called chemoreceptors. The sense is primarily used for smell, detects the presence of odorants, which does not play a role in this specific scenario. Taste. What most do not realize, a lot of what we taste is based on what we smell. Other sensations, such as food, temperature, and texture, are detected by general sensory neurons. Other special senses that will not be needed for this scenario. Summary. Altogether, these special senses work together by detecting their specific stimuli for their special sense. The receptor cells will then stimulate one or more cranial nerves that carry the signals to the central nervous system. Pathways for all of the special sense, excluding olfaction, will travel through the brainstem to the thalamus. Neurons from the thalamus, or the olfactory tracts in the case of olfaction, terminate in primary sensory areas, where conscious awareness and identification of the stimulus occur. References.